Hello and welcome to WISE. I'm Rosie Acosta. WISE stands for Women Inspiring Success and Empowerment. This is a 10-part podcast series featuring interviews with successful, inspirational women in business, art, entertainment, and more. Aristotle said, "Happiness is a state of activity." Oscar winner Shirley MacLaine said, "To be happy, you have to be willing to be compliant with not knowing." And Eleanor Roosevelt said the three most important requirements for happiness were a feeling that you've been honest with yourself and those around you, a feeling that you've done the best that you could both in your personal life and in your work, and the ability to love others. But what exactly is happiness? What does it mean to be happy? And why is it so hard for so many of us? So many of us feel stifled, limited to how we can express ourselves authentically. And there's no way any of us can be contented with someone else's definition of happiness. Our guest this week, Tal Rabinowitz, to quote Booth Moore from The Hollywood Reporter, she is a former executive VP comedy development at NBC who started a new career as the founder of the Den Meditation Studio in Los Angeles, which offers virtual classes. To quote Booth Moore, as a Hollywood executive, Tal Rabinowitz worked on The Mindy Project and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. After she was let go, she let go, and now helps others do the same with Den Meditation. We had the honor of speaking with Tal about her career in television, her new career in meditation, and how authenticity and self-expression can lead to happiness. Here's my conversation with Tal.
Obviously, I've interviewed you for Radically Loved Radio before. I teach at your studios. I'm a big fan of you and what you're doing in the world. And
you. It's true.
I'm like, let me glorify you for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
So when I thought about this podcast, like I really wanted to get people from all different backgrounds, like women in particular, of course. And I just started to make a list of people who I really admired and who I really looked up to, or who I just felt were really the embodiment of inspiring, success and empowerment.
I love this. Can we do this every week?
So yeah. And these are like questions that I didn't necessarily get to ask you before, and I feel like this is the best platform to ask you about, things that you've gone through in your life or lessons that you've learned, because at the end of the day, I really feel like as women, we're all kind of learning the same things at different capacities. And so one of the first things I want to ask you is, with regard to wisdom and how we acquire wisdom, like what do you think about, or who do you think about when you hear the word wise?
When I hear the word wise, I think of a couple people automatically. My grandfather, who I used to spend my summers with a lot in Israel, who was just one of the kindest and most wise men, really helped, I'm sure people have opinions about it, but like fight for that country.
Yeah.
But he was that guy that anyone would go to. They could be younger and they'd come to him with like love problems. You know what I mean? And he was just always very practical, cut to the chase, but just was so wise. I mean, he would translate poetry into 8 different languages. He'd have books of medicine because he was really a frustrated doctor because that just wasn't available to him.
Right.
He wrote his own poetry in like 7 different languages. He was just not only brilliant with the mind, he just was also brilliant with the heart. And I remember I used to sneak down, because it'd be Israel, so it'd be jet lag, and I remember I'd be really little. And so when we'd first get there and the jet lag would kick in, I would sneak down at 4 a.m. and he'd already be in his office, working at his computer, and I would just sit. I'd pick a book from the library, and I would just sit with him, and I would love it. Mm-hmm. And then it makes sense. The next person for me is my mom, which is his daughter. Different. My mom was just a really strong woman, especially during a time when, she was breaking barriers. And I think for me, the fact that she was always so strong and never faltered in what she felt was right or what she needed to do. She was never one for public opinion. Not that she didn't care, but she was just not that person. It was her, and she was doing everything her own way. And that I'm forever grateful for, because she really taught me how to be a strong woman.
I love that.
Yeah, I was really lucky that way.
That's really great. And to have that sort of that reverence for who she was and what she did. I think that speaks volumes to who inspired you in your journey.
For sure. I mean, I've said it to my mom a couple times. I mean, there's been a few times I remember in my journey. My mom is a doctor. She's 70. How old are you, Mom? Like, I'm so bad with the ages now. It's funny.
She's aging.
She is, right. She's like late 70s, still practicing, goes into work every day in Manhattan. But my point is, when she started, women weren't really in the field. She was the only woman in her department until I was like in my teens. I mean, for a long time. So she was really like in it. And I mean, all my friends' parents were like doing carpool. And I mean, moms were doing carpool and stuff. And they used to just give my mom such a hard time, indirectly, like peer pressure, because it wouldn't be my mom doing it, because my mom was off and she was always on call. And so I remember there was one time in my career, in my entertainment career, and I was very lucky, and I moved up and was very lucky, and I had an offer, and I was trying to debate what job, and somehow it came out what the offer was, and my mom got very quiet. And I said, "What?" She goes, "I think you're making more money than me." And I was like, "What?" And it was insane, and it said a lot about the system, because my mom should be making way more money, right? But it was this weird moment of like, wait, what? And first of all, undeserved. Like, it's totally flipped. I worked in entertainment. She was like saving babies.
Right.
But we had that moment, and I was like, well, that's crazy, and you should be getting paid more. I remember saying that to her. And I was like, and I'm so impressed with how hard you work, knowing you should be getting paid more. But it's almost like when she entered the system, she's not one to like
make waves,
because that was the time. You kind of couldn't. I mean, they didn't make waves so that we could.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I want to ask you about that too, just in your own personal experience. Like, I think a lot of women, so even at that time, there was a different sort of, there was a different energy around women speaking up or standing up for themselves or being vocal or being too verbose, you know? So now it's like, it's totally different now. Women have a more empowered existence. Like, we are making waves. Our opinion matters.
We're taking it back for sure.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different perspective on it, though I agree with that. I feel like we're taking it up. I think a lot of women from that generation, and I'm talking like older, you know, it's a little bit like the Hillary Clintons, like, not that I'm saying my mom's Hillary Clinton, but I'm saying those women who really did break into something. Yeah. People look at them now and feel like they're very harsh humans. And people would say that about my mom too. She's tough. And she was, as were her friends who were similarly doing the same thing, because you had to find a way to fit into the boys' club and not make the waves, so that the boys were weirdly okay with you being there. But then the problem is, then when they start trying to have a louder voice, the women from our generation are like, it doesn't work for me, because we have so much more privilege of being able to do it with our own truth in a different way. But we wouldn't be able to do it if they weren't doing that. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think there was a different paradigm back then where we had to emulate a more masculine way of being. And I feel like I balance with that too, because of who my example was and my DNA and how I was raised. And with the Israeli, I mean, I got a lot of it coming at me if you think about it. It's like, and I feel like that's literally been my journey, which has been beautiful. And I've had like a second wave of really, I've always been more emotional than my mom, and I've always been more sensitive to just people and energy. I've just always been like that since I was a kid. Well, not since I was a kid, but I've noticed as an adult really learning how to balance that and be okay with that, of being able to have that soft side and learn how to kind of manage differently or make decisions differently versus which I used to do also. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a very well-known fact that you worked in the entertainment industry for a really long time, and, you know, being in that position, you know, created a heightened stress environment for you to decide to create this incredible space. But when you were in that, and you were in it for 20 years, right? Yeah, almost, something like that. So 15 to 20. I always keep trying to do the math. I'm like, how long was it? Well, I mean, it sounds good. I'll give it 20. I'm just kidding. You're like 31. I love her. So yeah, like being in the entertainment industry, and navigating all of those power dynamics, just not even just as a woman, just as a person, what do you think the biggest lesson you learned in having a career
that was extremely demanding on you in all of the facets of who you are as a person?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was weirdly thinking about that driving here because I was about to give a talk to people who I used to work with. And one of the things I wanted to say to them was start paying attention to your energy. Because I feel like what happens in those jobs is you're almost rewarding yourself for that energy that we know is actually very destructive to your body, to your emotion, to everything. And you fuel on it. You fuel on kind of this adrenaline pump because it's like, I remember it's almost like I can feel it now. It's almost like I'm recalling it. Like you would just be on phone calls and just a phone call of like getting it done and like being fast. And if someone's like mad at you or you're mad at them, and it's just this adrenaline, like you can feel it now too, right? It's this adrenaline pump that naturally happens no matter what you're doing, whether you're in the meetings and you're trying to get your shows sold or, you're on set and you need it to, So for me, it's what I wish I knew more then, but I feel like I learned, especially coming out of it, was I feel like there was a way to manage the energy and still do that. That probably would allow for more longevity. People stay in those jobs forever, but I don't see them all necessarily flourishing as humans. There's a difference. It doesn't mean they're not happy at a baseline. It doesn't mean they don't love what they're doing. I hate when people are like, they're all miserable. That's not true. I think people have a different sense of what it is or where they can go. And I feel like sometimes in jobs like that, your definition of success just gets so specific. It's very much about whether it's the acquisition, the show, the popularity, the money, the job, whatever it is for you, that becomes a definition of success. And I feel like the happy people within there learn how to be happy in smaller ways, whether it be like, I'm going to make this part of my job super fun. And so it's not that they're not happy, but it's like when you can take a breath and expand, oh my God, then you see how much more there is in general. And I'm not saying more there is out there, I'm not saying that. I just mean for you as a human and to evolve and to grow and pull out the layers. So I kind of wish I could have learned to manage my energy better. And again, that's not so much like taking care of yourself and self-care. It's like feeling it and directing it, because I do feel like it would have been, I'd be interested in kind of a different angle of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. Well, and to build on that with regard to this podcast and this idea of success, what does success look like to you now? Like, how would you define success?
So different. I think about it all the time. If anything, my world keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and that to me is successful. Like every time I think about can we sell our house? And maybe we rent again and go to a small place here. Everything keeps getting, all of a sudden, the more comfortable I get in me, the more I want less. And because it's the simplicity and I want to be able to use my energy to be able to grow. And again, it's not growing in the things you can see. And again, I'm not saying you can't have nice things. I hate when people say that to other people because then it makes everyone feel like they're doing it wrong.
Sure.
You got to do what works for you and what makes you happy. But I will say success for me is now, I keep looking in, I'm just where do I need to go? Where do I need to grow? And sometimes the visions that come to me, it might be perceived as a lack of success to other people.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean? It might be career shifts again, or changes that for other people might look as either failures or stepping back. But for me, I can feel this ample opportunity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh no, it makes total sense. And I think that this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because I feel like for me, that is the epitome of wisdom and discernment. It's really acknowledging, this is what's going to serve my highest good.
Yeah.
Right?
And I feel like that's a major shift when you're asking me about my old job. And again, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. So it's none of that. It's just amazing how when you all of a sudden have the ability and the time and the oxygen to just get more in touch with yourself, how you just start to see how limited I was being on my actual self.
Yeah.
It was constraining me a little bit because it was just not allowing me to flourish where I needed to flourish.
Yeah. So what would you say has shifted with your belief of, let's talk about empowerment for a moment. So what was your belief about what empowerment was, let's say in your 20s, and how it's shifted to where you are now?
I would say in some ways it's very similar. I think the execution and how I expressed it is different. I feel like I've always actually, and again, hats off to my mom, I feel like empowerment to me has always been do you. Not like, let me be better than someone else to show them we can do it, because I feel like that gets lost in the messaging sometimes. You know, we deal with that, I think, a little bit with feminism. I see a lot of women like forcing their daughters not to like princesses and not to like, you know, and I'm like, well, that's not feminism. Like, feminism is do you. Like, you want to wear heels and dye your hair and have your nails painted all the time and like stay home, like do it. Like, that's feminism, is being able to have the choice and be able to like own who you want and not have to compromise. So I feel like that's where things get lost a little bit. So I've never been on that side of the equation of feeling like I'm fighting for something that I didn't necessarily believe in. But I've always been very, even in entertainment, you know, one of my old bosses came up the other day, Steve Moscow, who was like the chairman at Sony, and even the presidents at Sony were amazing to me. I used to show up in flip-flops every day. And these are corporate jobs, and like with very rich people, mind you. And like some bosses had a better time with it and some didn't. Sony was very good about it. I mean, actually, before I left for NBC, that was one of their sales pitches to get me to stay. Who's gonna let you do this? Who's gonna let you be you? We let you be you, and they really did. And I've always been me. Like, I can't tell you how many casting sessions I've walked into with flip-flops on and like jeans, and I might have spruced it up slightly, but my version of sprucing up is like really pathetic. So, but my point is, I've always had that. Now, how I expressed it, I think I was, are we allowed to curse on this?
Yeah.
I think I was a little bitchier about it, and a little bit more like trying to prove a point about it in my 20s. And felt like I had to show that I was me and different. And I think now it's more like, it's softer. And it's still empowerment in the sense of like, again, I might make choices that people wouldn't agree with. And I've done that my whole career, all careers. But I check in and I'm like, if it feels good to me, I'm gonna do it. And if it's not the right choice, I know I can defend it because it was mine. And I probably will learn a million things from it. And so then it is the right choice, even though it might not have the outcome I want. So I feel like it's more my approach and my delivery. And now it's like my empowerment is within and I'm good. And I think before I was trying to like prove my empowerment. Was that?
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. What has been, you're a mom.
Yes.
What has been the biggest lesson that your daughter has taught you?
I'm in it. She's a toddler, so I'm learning every day. We are very alike in some ways. She is strong and tough and stubborn. I mean, she actually makes me look like a pussycat. So that part is interesting. And that part's actually not the hard part for me because I understand it. There's just some elements where it's things that are just so foreign to me. And that's where I find myself, and I can feel it. I can usually feel when I've parented in a way that just doesn't feel right. And it can be something so subtle. Someone else might be like, I didn't notice anything, but I can feel it. And I'll go back and I'll sit there like in my bed and think about it and be like, okay, what could I have done differently? How could I have given her more space? Usually it's how can I let her be her more? Because that's what I want. I want her to be her and I want to be able to support it. But the tricky thing as a parent, you're also trying, hopefully, to guide it and give them skill sets that will, like we're talking now, that will make them feel empowered right off the bat. Will give them just a stronger platform to work off of. But then it's like you have to always constantly check in, well, what part of this platform to work off of is my agenda and seems like a good platform for me, and what part of it has nothing to do with her? And that's tricky because it's subtle. And also like we all have triggers too. So I think learning how to like try not to get triggered with your children is also a whole big thing. Is like trying to like it really forces you to learn patience in a bigger way. And it's come at a perfect time for me because, like I said, when I feel softening and like balancing myself more, to have that lesson right in front of me. And I had a vision once, like I was meditating, and I was actually being like, okay, what do I need to do? I need to get this balance going. How can I do it? Honestly, what came through was your feminine's coming out through your daughter. Like your practice is through your daughter. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I think it's right. That more than anything is practical, every single day stuff that forces me to grow. Because we can talk all we want about the things we want to shift, but if you're not up against anything, it's hard to shift it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask you about that because I think it's important for us to encounter that resistance
1,000%.
Yeah. So like for you, in the moments where you have encountered that resistance, do you feel like you build a little bit more resilience, or is there a different tactic that you use for it?
It's both. It's funny, with her specifically, sometimes I'll still go to, like, let's say that impatient place, but then I'll notice when I'm kind of beating myself up about it later, I'm like, but that wasn't as bad. Like, if I go back to when I started to realize this is so much better. Like, it's, even though to me, I know it's still coming from the same place, so that's what I want to fix, is that hopefully I'm not even reacting from that place anymore. It's like, it's getting less and less and less strong. So for me, I still have to work on not even having those reactions and like, hopefully starting to like react from somewhere else. But I can feel that it's just like, the frequency of it is just lessened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by frequency, I mean like the energy, not the amount of times.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of the belief system. I agree with that, and I think it's great. You know, I'm not a mother yet, but I'm hoping to learn those same lessons when
you will.
when that time does come.
This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? I know that the last couple of months for me and a lot of people I know, it has been such an emotional upheaval, up and down. This is coming from somebody who's been in and out of therapy for the last 15 years. BetterHelp will help assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line, it's not a self-help, it's a professional counseling service done straight online. There's a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available in many areas, especially with a lot of things being closed down right now. The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get a timely and thoughtful response, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so that they make it easy for you and free to change counselors if you need. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit their website and read their testimonials that are posted daily. Visit betterhelp.com/wise. That's better, HELP, and join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. Today, they're offering our listeners for the Wise podcast 10% off of your first month if you visit betterhelp.com/wise. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/wise, WISE, to get 10% off of your first month. So my workout schedule's been rather hectic lately, and I'm noticing it's starting to really wear me down. And even though I'm getting all my workouts in, practicing yoga nidra and meditation, and doing whatever I can to keep my stress levels low, I can still feel like I'm stressed. No one likes feeling stressed out, and even worse, how it can affect the people closest to you. But lately I've been doing something a little different, and it's been helping me feel great again. A friend of mine who recently recovered from an absolute burnout told me that it wasn't time off or more rest or a secret relaxation technique that saved him. This is where it gets really interesting. He said that all he did was add a mineral to his diet based upon his doctor's recommendation. I was hooked. So I asked him, of course, what mineral was it? And he told me that he was recommended a superdose of magnesium. You see, magnesium is the fourth most abundant mineral in the human body. Since the nutrient is responsible for 300 to 600 different biochemical reactions in the body, including metabolism, when your levels are low, you struggle with sleep, energy, metabolism, pain, and stress. You can get magnesium from certain foods like black beans, nuts, avocados, spinach, and more, but if you really want to make sure you get enough magnesium for what your body needs, I recommend using a supplement in addition to these foods. Now, before you go research magnesium supplements, know this. Most magnesium supplements fail to help you beat stress for two primary reasons. The first, they are synthetic, unnatural, and not recognized by your body. And two, they are not full spectrum, meaning they don't have all 7 forms that you need. So today I want to introduce you to the best magnesium supplement I've found. It's the most potent, complete, first full spectrum magnesium formula ever created. It's called Magnesium Breakthrough. Magnesium Breakthrough is a complete formula that includes naturally derived forms of all 7 forms of supplemental magnesium, and it doesn't contain any synthetic additives or preservatives. This is the most potent oral magnesium you will ever find, period. Many notice a sense of calm, relaxation, their nervous system and stress levels are soothed, and better sleep is often observed within the first week. If used daily and as instructed, most people use Magnesium Breakthrough in the morning, which is when I like to use it, to help them stay calm and resilient to deal with the day. And even within 3 to 5 weeks, most people experience a level of peace and serenity that they haven't felt in a very long time. I highly recommend trying Magnesium Breakthrough for at least 30 days to see how it will make a difference in your mood or stress levels. Today, you can get 10% off with a special WISE podcast coupon code when you visit biooptimizers.com/WISE and enter the code WISE10. That's BIOPTIMIZERS/WISE and use the promo code WISE10. And now back to our show.
But one of the things that I was wanting to ask you about as well, because sometimes I think that as women, we may encounter situations where either we feel like wisdom comes at a certain age or after a certain experience. I'm of the belief that wisdom can happen at any age.
I agree.
And yeah, so like, what is your general feeling of that? I mean, the only reason why I say it is because there's been a couple of situations, and I teach yoga and meditation. Like, there's been a couple of incidents where I've had teacher trainees that are starting to teach that are younger feel like they're inadequate because they're not of a certain age, so they don't feel like they're being taken seriously. Or sometimes maybe students have an opinion about having a 20-year-old teacher. You know what I'm saying?
That's interesting. So perception is you're not wise till you're
correct.
Old. Funny, I've been talking about letting my hair go gray. Maybe I should do that. Also, my classes will be packed. I should think about that. I think wisdom comes at all ages. I mean, because to me, I have a little bit more of a woo-woo aspect of it, which is I think we're all on different paths and different journeys at different times. So this lifetime for all of us, we're all doing different things. So you might meet a 75-year-old who might be the most immature person, and you can talk to them. And I have people in my family like that, who I love dearly, but it's like you feel like certain conversations, now I know there's nothing I can do. This is their journey. But when I was younger, I'd almost want to shake them and be like, how have you not figured that out about yourself yet? Or how have you not, because that's where they're at. They're not there yet. And then and look, I was a pretty put together 20-something-year-old. It's like sometimes you have those young kids who just get it. They understand it. It doesn't mean they don't make the mistakes, but like they just have a little more wisdom about situations, or a little bit calmer about it all. So I don't think it's about age. Do I think no matter who you are and where you are on your path, you're going to change as far as your life changes, what's happening with you? Absolutely. And so does more wisdom come with that? My husband and I / boyfriend, we have the same, we always talk about this.
We have the same situation.
So I always make sure people know it's one person, not two, because I call him everything. But he and I were watching The Bachelor last night, and oh my God, this season, because they get younger and younger every season, and I don't know why I still watch it. Maybe because it gives me something to complain about. But I was like yelling at the screen, being like, oh my God, don't do this, it's so obvious. And then I told him, like, see, I should go on as like a 40-something-year-old. I'd rock this whole thing. But my point is, like, they'll know. They're in like young 20s. I'm like, just in dating and experiencing, no matter how wise they are, they kind of have to fall on their face a few times. Yeah. And like, give them 8 years, 10 years, they'll watch that video and be like, oh my God, why was I doing that? So some things are life experience, but there's a wisdom that can be innate, that it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, wait till you have kids. These kids are coming out with wisdom like it's nobody's business. I mean, they say things that you're like, oh my God, like, and they see it. And part of it is I think our generation lets them be a little more, but that wisdom's there.
Wow. Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, you see it.
That's really cool.
So maybe like a 5-year-old is going to start teaching yoga classes.
Right? There is like they have like the youngest yoga teacher, I think she's like 11 or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's super cute. I would totally take her class.
I would too. How adorable.
Just to love her.
Yes.
Like whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do. One of the other questions that I want to ask is about something that you've experienced in your life where it was a big shift, like a big lesson. So if you had to look back on your life, and I'm not a fan of, oh, you regret something or you wish you would have done things differently, because I'm of the mentality that you live what you live because you have to live it, and that's the lesson that you have to learn.
Absolutely.
Thinking back on your life, what is a lesson that you hope you never have to repeat again?
Oh, well, I know I won't repeat it again. If that's the angle of the question, I've been married really married once. I'm not technically married now. And my gut and my instinct was always, and lovely human, by the way, great guy. I have nothing bad to say about him. Because I want to be clear, like I know who fucked up this relationship. But if I go back before we got together, like when he was pursuing me, there was always a voice that was like, no. And he was just very persistent, and he was cute. I mean, there was nothing wrong with, that's my thing. There was like nothing wrong with him. And I remember finally like slowly giving in. And then we had such a blast. Like we had a great kind of partnership and a lot of fun, and we had a ton of friends. Like we were kind of like the mom and dad of a big friend group. And so I remember I think I never necessarily wanted to get married in general. Like, I think that's me. He was a little more traditional. And I remember he was the one that kind of pushed me to move in. And I was like, oh, I was always a little more like the typical boy in relationships that way. Sounds like you can relate.
Yeah.
And so we, moved in. And then I remember when he proposed, again, and part of the reason I'm saying this in a longer version is because I want people to know, you can hear sometimes, the lesson I really learned in this whole thing that I made a debacle of and hurt people in the process was, I just wasn't listening. Like I wasn't listening at all. So it was there, the answers were there, and I never had to make a mess of anyone's lives. So I remember when he proposed, it was in Israel actually, again, to bring everything. He was smart, he was really kind and sweet. He knew that place meant a lot to me. And there was one night we were out and I could feel the energy shift. I could feel it. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to propose. Something's happening. He's going to propose. And I just started talking a million miles an hour just to give him basically no space to do it. And it didn't happen. And then we went to a restaurant where I knew it wouldn't happen. And then we had a lovely, awesome night. And he fell asleep. And I remember sitting there going, why did you have a problem with that? So if he was going to propose, why was that an issue? Like, what's wrong with you? You've been together forever. You live together. He's awesome. You have a great life. What's happening? I still didn't listen. And then it was the next day and he proposed. I remember he was even like, you didn't say yes yet. And I was like, yes. And I remember sitting there. And by the way, I really loved him. And I remember sitting in the van, like we were touring, doing stuff and having moments of like my stomach just dropping. And I remember texting a friend being like, I feel nervous or I can't sleep. Is that normal? They're like, oh my God, totally normal. I'm like, okay. Like once someone told me that was normal, I wrote it off as normal. And then we got married, still best day of my life. It was an amazing wedding. Our friends were so amazing. So that day was so special. Whatever, long story short, very soon after I found myself saying things of people like, how's married life? I'd be like, married life is hard. By the way, nothing was wrong. Like nothing was happening for me to have that response, but clearly that's what I was feeling. The lesson I didn't learn is I didn't know yet in my life. I was always very good at communicating, but I was always terrified to communicate if I knew it might hurt someone. And so by not communicating, I kept all of this bottled up, and then I did stupid shit, and I ended up cheating on him. And it was the worst thing I would ever do. It's so not my style. I am still healing from it because I carry so much shame about it because the idea of hurting someone, again, the whole point was to not hurt him.
Right.
But you do stuff until you learn. Now here, what I learned from it was twofold. Listen. Your body's telling you what's right for you and what's wrong for you. So if I listened, I wouldn't have even gotten there in the first place. And then what I really learned, because I chose to learn from it, the minute it started happening, and then he and I were talking about it, and we were really in it, I was in therapy with I think I was seeing 3 therapists at one point. Because my point was, why did I do this? What is happening? What do I have to learn from it? And even though it was a lot, and that was those couple of years were really hard for me, I learned so much. And I really found, unfortunately for Alec at times, because now I just say it all, and I'm sure he's like, oh my God, stop. But I really learned, like, I'd rather talk about stuff and hurt someone in the process. And same thing, I'd rather hear stuff and be hurt a little bit, but at least know what the truth is. So that was gnarly, it was awful, it was horrible. Some of the best life lessons I ever got. And I think part of the other life lesson I got too is like, sometimes you do shitty things. And I'm not excusing it, I'm not condoning it, but people, before they judge someone else, need to realize that man, there's a totality of man, and we're all layered, and we've all done some shitty things, and we hopefully have all done some amazing things. And you can't define someone by one of those things. Yeah. And nor can somebody define themselves by one of those things. Because once you start doing that is when you start going down the rabbit hole and limiting yourself.
Yeah. So, no, I totally agree. I love that you say that, because especially coming from a family who all relationships were treated, like everybody cheated. My parents cheated on each other.
So for you, it was more a norm then.
Oh, it was 100%. It was like a complete normal thing. And nobody, it was never like a thing. It would cause issues. There would be fights.
Of course, it hurts people.
Yeah, people get hurt in the process, but there is this sort of like, oh, this is
that's how we do it.
This is just, this is however, that's normal. Like, you know? So for me, it was learning the lesson that that's not normal. Right. Like how normally people do things. What's happening is that there is an internal struggle that people are going through that aren't dealing with their own issues. And at the bottom line is this idea of honesty and being completely truthful, right?
It's so freeing. It's freeing, like when you can do that. Because I mean, Alec and I have had some really tough times too, but ultimately I think the reason our relationship gets stronger and we get closer is because we've always been very truthful about it. So it's like, you really learn to love someone truly when you see all the sides.
Yeah. Oh,
the good and the bad, the ugly. I mean, it's true.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is one of the things that I find difficult sometimes in the health and wellness community is this whole, like, everything is positive, rainbows and butterflies and everything's great.
I couldn't agree more. I struggle with it because, like, the whole point of quote unquote spirituality is just the journey, the growth, the evolving. And part of that means going from one place to another. And so you can't just be here if you're not going anywhere. And then when you get here, there's a whole nother slew of things you realize you got to get there. And it's like, so, and look, I mean, you know, Kobe, is it okay to use timeline stuff? Because I don't know what. Like when Kobe passed, I actually taught a whole class about this, kind of what I was saying earlier about the totality of man, because people immediately jumped, and it really bothered me on, well, he's a rapist, how could you? And it really made me think, and it started really making me think about, oh my God, how can you, in this community too, and especially to pretend like people don't have stuff. Like that's why we're here. I mean, that's why we're here on earth. It's like you're given stuff to learn and grow. And I think it's probably hard to be around someone that you see making the same mistakes over and over and not growing, but to not embrace someone who you see learning and evolving from stuff. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can't even be a good teacher if you haven't done some things in your life. And I'm not saying go out and do them, but I'm saying if you haven't experienced things, you can't understand or have any empathy at all for someone else or understanding.
Well, I mean, that's like so perfect because that's the whole purpose of this podcast is like being able to just be human and have this experience and acquire wisdom from having real life experiences. I mean, I totally agree with everything that you're saying. I think it's important for us to be able to have honest self-appraisal. I feel like it's not done enough.
I think it's huge, and I think it's missing a little bit, like, because I get it. When you try and go, again, it depends who's watching this and what they're looking for as far as success. If someone's like, how can I get a great career? How can I make money? And that's fine too. I feel like part of the thing is just remember who you are, because I've seen, and I've been around so many people in both industries that just slowly, weirdly just morph into whatever it is. And I literally talked about this last night where all of a sudden, like, the lingo changes, even in our business. I mean, right, all of a sudden you meet someone and it's like, it's the way they start speaking about everything. And it's like some people, and you're like, where did you go? Now, it doesn't mean you can't like those concepts or have those concepts and own those concepts, But if that's not how you speak, you don't have to start speaking like that.
Yeah.
But it sounds so small, but it's, again, words represent you. Words are the first line people see. I mean, there's other things, there's energy, but the first thing someone actually concretely sees is when you're talking about it's a word. Like when you're saying that's expressing yourself. And so it's like, once you put it out there, it becomes a reality, it becomes energy, and then that starts defining who you are. So I think it's like, I just want people, as they go, to feel like they don't have to necessarily conform to something, because I feel like that's when you get lost, and then you start forgetting, like, what am I even trying to achieve?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
I feel like
so
the
good.
journey starts to get a little like muffled, and then that's when you start picking just things that you feel like you're supposed to be achieving.
Right. Well, I think it's just like we're so complex, aren't we? Like
We are. That's the fun part.
Yeah. It's so interesting to just see, because we're so confined to the things that work, and when they work, we want to stay there. It's like, nope, this works. This feels good. I'm going to stay here.
Right.
Like, I'm going to just stay in my little box. And then it's like, okay, it's time to grow and evolve. And some people decide to go into the next little box, into the next little step. And some people don't. They just want to stay in this cocoon of ignorance is bliss. Whatever. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble with saying that.
No, but I agree with you, because I think what is interesting about that is everything's changing constantly. I mean, if everything's energy changes, it moves. Nothing's static. Nothing is static. So for those, and I agree with you, people who feel like, change makes them nervous, so then they like clamp down, it's like you're actually going the hard way, because you're fighting against a current. Because you're afraid of this current, you're afraid of where it's going to go, but the current exists. So like you can like hold on to that like one little leaf on the tree branch, like in the current if you want. But at some point it's going to take you, and you could have planned all this time and like maybe had your like floaty and like drank a beer on the way. It's like, but instead you made it so much harder for yourself, and now you're plummeting down the waterfall. But do you know what I mean? And it's like, you wish people, if you could be, I try and tell that to people, I'm like, you think you're controlling the change is there. It's just a matter of when it catches up to you. And so the actual, if you want to like go with it, would be just constantly go with the flow, because then you don't actually have to worry about getting plummeted ever down that waterfall. Doesn't mean shit won't happen, but I mean,
no, it's true.
Shit always happens.
I know, yeah, shit happens. You hear that, everybody? Oh, okay, perfect.
There's nothing you can do about it.
So I just have one. Obviously, I can talk to you forever, and we can have this like day-long conversation. I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions, and it's about sort of your idea of what wisdom is, and what does it mean to be wise and inspiring and successful and empowered. And so I'm just going to say the word, and you have to just tell me like the first thing that comes to your mind. It's fine. You're going to do great. And it could be a sentence, it could be a word, it could be whatever you want it to be. So don't feel limited. Wisdom.
Knowing yourself.
Inspiration.
Inspiration is that little seed of energy that comes in that you just can't deny.
Success.
Success is happiness unattached to anything specific.
So good. Oh, that's so good. That should be the tagline to the podcast. Empowerment.
Empowerment. Owning yourself and not apologizing for it.
Oh, that's so good.
Okay, I'm glad these are coming out okay. This is the stuff that makes me nervous.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's like totally. Like I'm bad at playing games. Like don't have me do a charades. Like never have me do a charades.
Oh my God. Okay, good to know. So for the final question that I wanted to ask you in particular was...
It's like our little pet.
I know. Just keeps going. If you could give your daughter one piece of advice that she can carry with her on a little piece of paper from now until the last day on this planet.
Ooh. I mean, there's a couple things I say to her always. One that she repeats now all the time, which I think is sweet. And it's specific for her, but she always says, we don't say the word can't. Because I always tell her, you don't say can't. You can say you still need help, or you're still learning, or you're figuring it out, but we don't say can't. Because I always want her to know that really anything is possible. You might have to sit back for a little bit and like reassess, but you can do anything. And honestly, the second thing goes into that, which is how powerful she is, which I tell her all the time too. It's like, you are so strong and you are so powerful. And sometimes she believes it and sometimes she doesn't. But I keep saying it, hoping that it just sits there somewhere.
Oh,
yeah, she's
lovely.
pretty special. We're very lucky.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Oh my God, I love it.
I love you so much, and I'm so grateful that you did this.
So grateful for you.
Thank you for
Those
being.
were great questions.
Oh, good. Thank you for being part of this project, this podcast, and for continuing to be a woman that inspires me. And I'm so grateful for you, and I hope that we continue to just grow and flourish and
We will.
continue to do things.
See? There you go. You're learning. I'll write it for you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wise Podcast, and thank you, Tal, for joining us. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. We really appreciate your support. This podcast is produced by me, Rosie Acosta, and Aviv Rubenstein. You can find Aviv on Instagram at Rambo Calorician. Join us next week for another episode. This is your host, Rosie Acosta. Peace.